Again for Patrick. So this month we have been exploring the story of the Exodus, and the truth is this is a story that we will be referring to and looking for its wisdom and guidance over the next couple of years, because in truth it's also our story as well. We are living this story. And last week when we left the Israelites, they were preparing to leave Egypt, being led by Moses. And if you remember, Moses was living a very quiet life. He was kind of happy. He was married, he's kind of living in the hills. And then God calls him out of his comfort zone with the burning bush and says, you have to lead my people out of Egypt and into the promised land. And if you remember, instead of Moses saying, yeah, sounds like a great idea, I'll do it, he says, can't you find somebody else to do this? I'm not so great. I don't speak so well. I don't do all these things so well. And God says, I am that I am has sent you. Just as the I am that I am has sent each one of us here. Of each one of us is an expression of the divine, an expression of that presence and spirit of God within us. And so Moses kind of moved into the victim consciousness, like, oh, no, not me, right? And as we develop spiritually, life moves from happening to me, I'm a victim, and then it happens through me, and then finally as me. And so that is where Moses was called. It's where we are all called. So whatever lies before you right now in your life, whatever task is before you, know that it is the God as you that does the work. So a number of plagues were visited upon the Egyptians before they were willing to release the Israelites. And sometimes in our lives, it's through discomfort and pain and suffering that we make changes. When we realize that people or circumstances or things no longer fit. And the truth is that once a decision is made, we need to gather our resources and take stock of what we want to release and what we want to take with us. So, and again, that's another process that we're engaging in here, is it not? We are looking at everything in this building and going, okay, so what is it we keep? What is it we let go of? What is it that is already a part of us that we have called in? And anytime we make any kind of change in our lives, that's what we're called to do. We're called to take inventory and to look at what do I keep and what will I release. So in this Exodus story, in Genesis 3, God says, I will bring these people into such favor with the Egyptians that when you go, you will not go empty-handed. So they're kind of getting ready to go. The Egyptians are kind of looking at, the Israelites are like, all right, what am I going to take? And he says, each woman shall ask her neighbor and any woman living in the neighbor's house for jewelry of silver and gold and clothing, and then you'll put them on your sons and daughters so that you can plunder the Egyptians. So not a very high holy thing, is it, that God is telling them to do? But we can always look at this metaphysically. I mean, one way to look at it is, they've been slaves for how many years? So it's kind of like a bit of retribution, isn't it? It's like, kind of payment for my services. But on the other hand, if we look at this story, when you feel like you're called out into something new, you may not have the resources that you need in order to pursue it. And maybe you need to borrow the resources. Maybe you need to get a scholarship or ask relatives. For us to make the change and the move in the building, we're going to sell off. We're selling off this back part of the property so that we can transform into something new. That's the resources that we're going to use. But also we're looking at what are our inner resources. So whenever we're making a change, do you have the strength? Do you have the courage? Do you have the wisdom? And if you don't, guess what? You can borrow it from your friends, from your neighbors, from your family, from your spiritual community. You can lean on them to encourage you, if you will, right? So we don't have to have all of those resources ourselves. So the Israelites, they finally leave Egypt, and they're taking off on an adventure, and they don't know really what lies before them. And we are on an adventure also of transforming this physical space, and we too don't know what lies before us, do we? I mean, we sort of do because we have our guides, but I think that by entering into this project, we have called in not just a physical transformation of our space, but I think we're also calling in a spiritual transformation of our community and of us individually. Anybody else feel that? It's happening. So I was at Unity of Lindvig on Friday night. The minister was being ordained. And so what was interesting to me is every time I ran into somebody who knows that I'm from Seattle Unity, the first question was, so what's going on with the building project? And what seems to be out in the community is that it's happening next week, that we're moving next week. And every time I say, well, actually, no, we're still going to be here for at least a year, and it's going to take another 3 years. I said, I'll be lucky if I'm alive by the time we get back into the new building. And you know what? That's actually something to think about, like how many of us are going to be here, right? And I'm not building it for me. We are building it for us, but we're building it for future generations, right? So the things that we're doing and that we're seeing are for the future generations, and we may or may not be here to see it manifest, but we're a part of bringing that into manifestation, just as the Israelites, when they left Egypt, many of them never did get to the promised land, but we'll get there, promise. All right. Yeah, I went off on a tangent there, never mind. So as they're leaving, there is an angel in the form of a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day that leads them. And so they're being divinely guided. And I believe that in many ways we too are being divinely guided on this journey, that we have our own angels. We're being led by our board of trustees, by the SUV team, by the staff, by the volunteers, by the design team, the architects, the project managers, the general managers. We have this whole team of this incredibly brilliant and talented and wonderful people that are serving as our pillars at this moment. So here they're going, they're leaving, they're being led by their light, and then the Israelites hit the Red Sea. And not only do they hit this big block, but behind them are 600 Egyptians on chariots chasing them down. Now, historically, it is also possible that instead of the Red Sea, it was the Reed Sea, because in Hebrew, the words are very similar. And if it was the Reed Sea is very marshy. There's lots of mud and stuff, and so as the chariots were coming and chasing the Israelites, they would get stuck in the mud, wouldn't they? And maybe they would drown. So either you believe, or whatever, the Cecil B. DeMille view, where you put the thing and the seas part and everybody goes through, that's pretty dramatic, or whether it's the Reed Sea and their chariots got stuck in the mud, either way it's a miracle, yeah? Either way it is a miracle. So the seas are parted and they get to go through. But this is what's interesting to me, because it's so human, that as the Israelites see the Egyptians coming up behind them and the sea in front of them, they looked up and they saw the Egyptians marching after them. And they were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, what, were there no graves in Egypt for us to be buried in, that you had to bring us out to the desert to bury us? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, leave us to the Egyptians? It would be better for us to have served the Egyptians than to die in the desert. What, there were no graves? We had to come out here? So we see this kvetching and this complaining, and it's very interesting because it's a theme in the story. But have you ever felt that when you've made some kind of a change and you're like, really? What was I thinking? Wouldn't it have been better just to stay back where I was? Wouldn't it be better if we just didn't move forward with this project at all and just kind of did church, did community, did classes and things? But instead, we've ventured off into this project. So the kvetching is part of, it's just part of reality. But it is interesting to ask ourselves, how often do we complain? Right? How often do we complain? So this crossing of the Red Sea and the hero's journey would be called the crossing of the threshold, right? And that is, you do your prep work, and then the first block hits and you want to turn back. It's all a big mistake. We should have kept quiet. We could have continued with the Egyptians, and we want things to go back to the way they are, but the truth is, you can't, right? So one of my girlfriends, her son, just went off to college, and he's very much a homebody, way more than most kids, And he went 2 years to community college, but he really wanted to attend this one specific school, which was very far from home. So his mom questioned him, "Are you sure you want to go that far from home? Because he's never been away from home." "Yes, Mom, of course. This is the school that I want." So they went, they looked at it, everything was great. And then they flew out to the school. He took one look at his room and he freaked out. And he said, I want to go home. I can't stay here. I can't do this. I was wrong. Please, I want to go back to my room. I want to go back to community college, and I want my cat. I don't want any of this. And it was very hard because she called me and she's like, "I don't know what to do. Do I bring him home with me?" And I was like, "All right, let's play this out. Where does this go if you bring him home? Or if you have him, make him stay." Of course, she said, "You have to stay at least till the end of this semester." But his feelings and his experience, have we not all felt that sometime when you step out into something and you're like, "Oh, I just want to go back to my room with my kitty. I just want to go back to the way things were and to keep them comfortable and soft and knowable." And yet, what happens if we do that? We stagnate, we die, we don't move forward. So you may feel that way sometimes with this building. I know a lot of people are having a lot of grief over the changes that are happening. And say, again, let's just kind of go back to the way things were. But we do have that pillar of fire in so many forms that are guiding us. Loner Wolf said, "All true inner growth will make you feel uncomfortable, disturbed, or scared for a little while, but it's okay. It will pass." So I think that we are constantly crossing thresholds in our lives, small ones, big ones, and sometimes when we are pursuing what it is that we love most, we cross a threshold not just for ourselves, but for the collective. And for some reason this week, I've been thinking about Jackie Robinson, that he loved baseball and was great at it and played in the Negro Leagues. And he was the first African-American man to play Major League Baseball. And one may look at it and go, well, that it's about baseball, but it isn't about baseball. It was about racism. And it was about his ability to step into this experience that was all white in such a gracious form that he crossed the Red Sea, if you will. He crossed the threshold, and he did it not just for himself, but he did it for the collective. He did it for all of us. And granted, we have many more thresholds that we have to keep crossing, but in our lives, there's big ones and small ones. So many of you know that my little dog Geo died last May, and she was with me for 14 years. She was like my little Damon. And I've obviously been thinking about, when's the next dog that I'm going to get. And so I've been doing my research, and so I want you all to meet. Hazel. This is Hazel. And I know, like I said, we have big thresholds, we have little thresholds. I get this is a little threshold, but I have to tell you, there are times when I feel like the Israelites at the Red Sea with the Egyptians behind me, because she is really cute, but she's actually a gremlin. And she's chewing cords, and she's biting, and she's chasing the cats, and she's up every 2 hours. It's like having a baby. And so, and of course, I'm going to move forward, and I know that the love and the gifts that she's going to bring the family are going to far outweigh any discomfort that we are experiencing with her now. Plus, she's so cute, don't you think? And normally I name my animals after some god or goddess, and I had a million names, but the only name she answered to was Hazel, so. So that's it. All the names that I had. Farina, she was born on the feast day of Farina, who's some goddess, but she didn't like it, so. So change and transformation are what we signed up for when we stepped into this body, when we stepped into this life. We stepped in and agreed to change and transformation, because even if we try not to change, everything else around us will change anyway. And there'll be days when we complain and we wonder, why didn't we just leave things the way they were? But life isn't static. So again, there are many Red Seas to cross. There are many thresholds, some big, some small. So whether your life is quiet and stable, like Moses was, or whether you feel like whether you feel like you're being plagued, know that you are being called, and that the I am that I am has sent you. And each threshold leads to the deeper awareness of the promised land. And we are going to, again, continue this story, so we invite you to stay following the service as we move forward and we look at some of the plans about where we're going. God bless you.